Welcome back to the Clear Blue Tiles Seasonal Houses Table Runner Quilt Along. We are actually on our last week. We're going to assemble our runner and we're going to quilt it using our clear blue tiles. I'll step you through how to do all over quilting with one design and how to lay it out if you want to do a custom design for your runner. The runner has some options for quilting. There's the small corner squares, which can use what they call the bitty blocks that come in clear blue tiles. You've got borders. You can quilt the borders differently, and then you can quilt the inside, or you can quilt it with an all over, which is what I'm going to do today, but I will show you how to lay it out if you want to do something more custom. The first thing I'm going to do is show you how to lay this out for assembly. If you have your instructions, it's on page 16. There's a nice diagram here. It shows you exactly how to lay it out. For your house and tree blocks, you do have the stabilizer on them because we piece these in the hoop. I find that this is a little bit slippery when I stitch, so I like to pin whenever I work with the stabilizer on the back. I don't want to take the time to go around and trim off the extra stabilizer, and it's a very lightweight. It doesn't need to be trimmed. You can leave it there. It's not a problem. Here's the layout of my runner. I've got it laid out on a sewing machine cabinet. The sewing machine's tucked underneath on the shelf. There are a couple things I took into account as I laid it out. The first thing I did was I set the little picture in front of me right there. Then I laid it out with everything in the right place. All my trees are the same, so I don't have to worry about the trees. The main thing I wanted to look at were the houses. I've got this house, and this house. They have the same design. And then the house over here and over here have the same design. This is the darkest of all the houses, so I put this in the center. And then I put up these two houses. And when I first laid it out, this one was over here. But I didn't want these two next to each other, the same color. So I moved it to the other corner. And that balances out the colors of the houses. I'm going to put it together by sewing the top row first, and then the bottom row. And then you sew your two rows together, top row to bottom row. And then you'll sew the small side borders to each side. And then for the long borders, you'll put the corner squares on the long borders on the top and the bottom, and then that'll go on each side. Starting out here on row 1, there's the outside tree to the plain block. I'm going to sew my house on. Here's how I'm pinning, because this is really slippery and it sort of moves weird on my sewing machine. I just put in a couple pins to make sure to keep it straight. I'm going to show you the back side of the first row. You can see how I pressed. I let the fabric go where it wanted to go. Anything that's embroidered wanted to push out. This is the only seam that has two embroidery blocks next to each other. It wanted to go this way because of all the little pieces here. That's fine. There's how I did my seams. Here's how we look from the front. You can see that it's not exactly perfectly straight, but it's fine. We're going to put borders on this. It'll all go together. Here's the second row. Same thing with the tree. The tree wants to push over on the seams, and all the blocks with the embroidered seams push over to the solid. That's fine by me. Now we have row 1 and row 2. Now you notice when you line them up, some of the seams intersect and some don't. And what's great about the way this is pressed, these seams that intersect, like right here, they're going to nest because this block is pushed out. These two blocks are pushed out. When you lay them together, the seams are going the opposite direction. So they'll lock into place. That's what's called nesting your seams. Makes it lie nice and flat when you sew it together. It's the easiest way, I think, for quilting is to have your seams nest. For seams like here with the house block, it's pushing this way and the tree is pushing this way. They're not going to nest. I'm going to pin it and try and match it up best I can. Here's the two rows sewn together. I haven't pressed it yet. There were only a couple spots where the seams didn't nest, and if you pin it, you'll be fine. You can always press open if you like. I didn't lose my point. I just haven't pressed it yet. Let's turn to the back. When you turn to the back, you can see that some of it wants to push up and some of it wants to push down. This wants to go up, this wants to go down, this wants to go up. I normally don't press open, but because we're going to be using the clear blue tiles and doing this on our embroidery machine, I'm going to press this center seam open. That way, when we have blocks with this stabilizer on the back that overlap, it sort of spreads the bulk. I don't want all of the bulk in one spot for my embroidery machine, I'm going to take a little bit of extra time, press these seams open on the back, just this one, and then I'll set some clappers down on top. I'll show you what a clapper looks like if you don't know what that is. These are clappers, so after you press with your iron, you set it down on top and it'll help flatten the seam and it helps absorb the heat. I'm going to go ahead and press these seams open and let them sit just for a minute, and then we're going to sew on the side seams. While this is sitting, I can take my long borders and sew the corner pieces on. I've got this all pressed, the seam is open, and I sewed the little corner squares on my bottom and my top borders. Looking at the side borders, we're going to sew these on. When I press these, I'm going to want to press them out so I don't see the dark underneath the light fabric. So when I press these, I'm going to press the corner squares in. So press these in and attach your side borders and press them out. Or if you're doing a dark color and these are light, you would do it opposite. Just always press to the dark side when you can so it doesn't show through your project. I have the side borders on. I do want to show you each side border had a little tiny piece. I think I dropped the other one. And I had to cut a little bit off to make them even. So if that happens, just trim it. So I've got a nice clean line here and here. Now I'm going to attach my bottom and my top borders and make sure I nest my seams where the little squares are and get that together. And then when I press these, I'll press out to the dark border. Everything's sewn together. My border is a little bit wavy. That means that this piece was a little bit longer than this piece. I went ahead and gave it a spray starch and a press. That brought it in a little bit, but this fabric was already starched. If your fabric's not starched, you could spray it with starch or spray it with water and do a steam iron, and that'll help shrink the fabric a little bit. For what we're doing, this is going to be fine. I have not cut my batting and backing yet. The reason is I haven't picked which size tile I'm going to use for quilting. Let's start laying out tiles and looking at options. On page 10 of your user guide, you can see what comes with the clear blue tiles. You can also use any other clear blue tiles file you may have purchased from Kimberbell. You have the little bitty blocks. These go in the little small squares if you want to do that separate in your corners. They have the seasons, winter, spring, fall, and summer. Fall has candy corn. I don't want to put candy corn on this runner. This isn't Halloween fabric, it's fall. This actually matches a quilt that I have. And this simple pattern here, the loops, matches the quilting on my quilt. The quilting on my quilt is a loop and then it has a little leaf and a loop. It almost matches exactly. What I'm going to do is all over quilting with the loops. But before we do that, we're going to lay it out as if you wanted to do custom quilting. I'm going to show you how to lay this out if you want to do the little bitty blocks in the corner, something different for your borders, and something for the inside of your quilt. We'll figure that out, and then I'll show you how to lay out for the overall quilting. Keep in mind what I show is also dependent on the hoop size that I'm using. If you're limited to a 5x7 hoop, you'll have to make adjustments. You'll have to do more hoopings. If you have a larger hoop that will fit the whole width of the project, it'll be a little bit easier. I have the Essentials set and the first expansion set. They now have an expansion set 2, which is even bigger than this. I don't think I need that, even though I have a larger machine now than when I first purchased this. The tiles in the expansion set 2 are really big. Let's start with the Essentials set, and we'll lay out for custom, and then we'll figure out overall. When you open your Essentials set, you've got the 2 slat bands. There's a tile here in the center. There's the water washable marker, and the USB is here. That's attached to my machine, so it's not here. And then underneath the tray, you have your tiles. You've got different size and shape tiles. You can see this one is out, the 8x8. This I used to do a wall quilt, and it happened to fit, just going 8x8, 8x8 all the way across. It worked out perfectly. There's all the different size tiles. There's block tiles, and there's border tiles. Got a piece of paper here and the water washable marker. This does wash away. I'm going to show you a couple of options. I grabbed a tile. This is a 6x6. The way they recommend you mark, once you have it laid out how you want, and we'll do that in a minute, but they recommend that you put the dot in the center And I'll show you how to center that, but this is going to help you when you get to your embroidery machine. And you mark the crosshairs. And if you're using this on your quilt, you want a light touch. I've found that you don't necessarily have to do this and go all the way, that if you just make a little mark like that, it helps you center and line everything up. There's a window here that says size. This is a 6x6 tile. If you're laying out a really big project, this is very helpful, and you can write 6x6. That way, when you've got everything laid out and the tile is off your quilt, you don't forget what it was. You need to know the size so you can pull up the right files. On the corners and all the sides, there are some marks. These will help you mark where your next tile goes. So they have you mark here and all the corners. I'm going to pull this up and show it to you. You can see the 6x6, the dot in the center, the crosshairs, and you can see the outside marks. This marker does come off when you spray it with water or wash it with water. There are some other options though. Some people like to use air erasable pens, which if you do that, you need to get on your quilting pretty quick. You don't want to let it sit. Friction pens, although I don't recommend a friction pen, they tend to leave like a ghost line after you've even ironed it. There'll be a little white line. They make a friction marker. That may work. What I'm going to do is use some tape. Let me pull off a piece of tape. We're going to pretend this piece of paper is my quilt, and that I'm going to want the center mark right there. What I would do is put down a piece of tape on my fabric, and you'll see me do this. And the reason I do that is that way I don't have to get my project wet. But the quilt that I did with this, I wrote all over the quilt. It came off. It was not a problem. So using tape is kind of a new thing for me. Just saves me from having to do that extra step of spraying. See the marks on the tape? Then I would go to my machine and get everything lined up, and then before I started my machine, I would take the tape off. That way I don't have to get my project all wet. That's kind of a quick lesson on how we're going to lay these out. Anything that's underneath this tile is where you're going to have your quilting. Kimberbell has some educational videos, and they say to think of it like a stamp. You can think of it that way if that helps. Let's go ahead and lay out our runner with a custom layout. I have a 9.5 by 14. If you're working with a small hoop like a 5 by 7, you're going to have to do multiple hoopings. It actually looks like the center of this project may fit in the 5 by 7. We'll play with the tile and we'll find out. Laying out for custom, we've got these little squares in the corners. Here's your little tiny tile that you would use for the little bitty block. And you would lay it out on your fabric right where you want to do your quilting. So you can center it. Keep in mind you're going to sew binding over the outer edges. You can butt it up against these two seams. Figure out how you want to lay it out. And you can center it, or you can slide it tight against those two seams. Then you would mark this just like I showed you. The center, the little lines, and then for this one, you're on the border. So you don't necessarily need to mark here, 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 and over on top, because you're not going to quilt anything additional over there. But you would want to mark your sides because we're going to add a border. So I'm going to put a clip on this to keep it in place for visual. If I was going to quilt the bitty block, I wouldn't necessarily want to use that big giant hoop. I'd probably want to use a smaller hoop. Remember those weird plastic things you get with your embroidery machine? If you still have them, they can help when you're hooping. It will help you because you set it in your hoop and you line it up, and the little slots fit on the sides, the top and the bottom, and see how there's a little hole. So when you draw that center dot, this will line up. You don't necessarily need these. If you have an embroidery machine that has a laser, it can help you line it up. So if I was going to do all 4 corners, I would go ahead and mark each of my 4 corners with the bitty block. Now you have borders. Let me look at my hoop. This border will fit the side border in a 5 by 7 hoop. Let's pull out our border tiles. And if you remember from video number 2, I showed you this chart and these charts, and I put a link below and you can fill everything out. That's certainly one way to do that, and then you immediately know which size tile to grab, or you can just grab your tiles and see what fits. I do know this was a 2.5 inch strip, so I probably want something that's 2 inches wide. Let's go ahead and open this. I actually haven't used any of the border tiles. I can see on top I have a 2x7. Let's just pull that out. Looks a little short. I probably want 2 inches, but a little bit longer. Here's a 2x8. That looks good. Do you see how that fits right within both of those little corner squares? I've got a slight overlap. So what I would want to do is account for that when I mark. I wouldn't necessarily want to butt it up right there against that seam here. And then I have the overlap there. I would center, lining up those lines. That's perfect. I'd put those lines on the seam. Then I would mark both my side borders with this tile. So that's a 2x8 tile. With a 5x7 hoop for the 2 inch border, this 2x8 is going to be the biggest tile you can use. There is a 2x10 in the Essentials set. See how that's too big? So you can't use that if you're doing this all in a 5x7. When you go to do your side borders, you will hoop this way, and you'll do the same thing with the tile. So you would lay it out like that. And then you would mark, and you'd want to go all the way to the end. Now, what do you do if it gets weird at the end? Let's look at that. This is why you want to lay everything out before you quilt. Let's pretend I'm doing this in a 5x7 hoop. Okay, this ends about here. I would have this marked. I'm just going to put my finger there, just so we can see what's going on. Then it's going to be about there. I would have that marked. And it's going to, oh. That's going to match. It's not going to get weird. That actually works. But let's say you were working with a bigger hoop and a longer tile. I'll pull one from the Essentials set to show you that. This is a great project for your 5x7 hoop. If that's all you have, you'll be fine. You'll have to do multiple hoopings, but everything fits. Let me get a different size tile. Let's say I've got a really big hoop. I want to use the 2x14. I actually tried it with a 2x12. Two 2x12s fit as well. It worked. But here's a 2x14. This is just to show you what to do if things don't fit. I mark that, and then I slide it down. See that? I'm running over into that square. The first thing I would do is try and find something that fit, which we found out is 3 of the small ones I just showed, and 2 2x12s would fit. But let's say for some reason one of them's missing, I don't have it, it's broken. I need something a little shorter to go here. That's where you can start swapping out your tiles. That one fits. You could do this border with a 2x14 and a 2x10. You don't have to have the same tiles. You just need to fill your area. This would work. There's where your lines would overlap, and that would fill this border. The files are designed to be continuous, so that even if you're not using the same size tile, when it's done, it's going to look like it was done on a long arm. Let's start looking at how we could quilt the center of the runner. So we laid out our corners with the little bitty blocks. We laid out the border. I have these 2 tiles out. We were just playing with these. This is a 6x6. You could potentially use a 6x6 and then take a smaller one down here and fill in that gap. It'll work. I try to find something that'll fill the space. That's the 8-inch square. But remember, we're in a 5x7 hoop for this example. If you have a larger hoop, 8-inch square, that looks like 3 layouts of the 8-inch square would work if you've got a hoop big enough for that. But let's say we're using 5x7. You can see the 8-inch tile does not fit in a 5x7 hoop. We need to find something that'll fit in the 5x7 hoop. These are my sticky notes I made when I got the set with my Pathfinder machine. I now have a bigger machine, but if you're working with a 5x7 hoop, the field size on mine was 4.87 by 7. So I can't go bigger than those 2 numbers. There's a 6x8, and see how it sits inside the hoop? But that's bigger than my field size. So I can't use that. That won't work. So I'm on a 5x7 hoop, a field size of 4.87 by 7. This is a 4x8, that won't work. 4.87 by 7, 4x6. This will work in my 5x7 hoop. You can see I still have a lot of extra space, but I have to look at that embroidery field size. This helps too. Let's pull that larger tile. Let's say you've got the 8x8. I need an embroidery design field size of 7.87 by 7.87. I have 4.87 by 7. Looking down here, you just have to find what fits. Look, 4 by 6. It's just what I pulled. 387 by 587 fits within my numbers. So that's what I have to use if I was quilting this with a 5x7 hoop. Knowing that, how do you lay it out? I'd lay it out this way. See how that fits real nice? It fits there, and it fits there. Each little section is going to fit. Like that fits there, and that fits there. Now, of course, this is a rectangle and a square, so it'll change as it goes down. But I know this would fit. I would mark this, mark it here. Let me put my finger there. Mark it there. We'll keep going down. I would mark it there, and I'm lining right up against, now keep in mind I'm not marking, I'm moving it, so I'm shifting it a little bit. Here and here, and again, it's going to fit right in there. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You'll have 8 hoopings for the center. And then remember, you've got your 4 corners, so now you've got 8 plus 4, you're at 12. 1 here for this border, 1 here for this border, that's 14. And then you're going to have 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So with a 5x7 hoop, this is going to take you 20 hoopings to do. That's the benefit of having a larger hoop for this project. Now, if you didn't want to do the corners and the borders, you could figure out how to lay this out. 1, 2, it's going to fit that way. 3, do you see that? So then you would have 1 hooping, 2 hooping, 3 hooping, and you're going to need 1, 2, 3, I think you're going to need 4. So you'd have 12 hoopings to do it that way. You would just load it into your machine this way. The quilting is non-directional. It can go on your machine this way or this way. Let's lay this out for one continuous pattern, and I'm going to use the large hoop for that. Here's my 2 big hoops, 8 by 12 and 9.5 by 14. It looks like the 8 by 12 will work. However, we're going to go back to our user guide. Here's expansion set, the blocks and the borders. Do you see how the 12 measurement has an embroidery field size of 11.87 inches? Let's measure this top to bottom. This runner, the way mine came out, measures close to 12.5 inches. So if I use the 12-inch long tile, it's only going to quilt 11.87. So here's 12 inches, it'd be right about here. That would probably be fine if I centered it, because I do have to allow for binding. But since I have the larger hoop for the larger machine and I have extra, I'm going to use the big hoop. This is the 8 by 14 tile. Let me lay down the hoop so you can see. Even though this hoop is 8.5 by 14, and this is the 8 by 14 tile, you see you still have space around it. But let's work with the 8 by 14 tile. Let's measure the finished size of my runner. It's 28 inches. 28 divided by 8 is 3.5. There's a couple of options that I have for this. I can center it like this and then build out, which will give me a hooping here. I'll need 1 hooping here, a hooping here, and a hooping here. So that's 3 hoopings, and then I'll need to find another tile to put on the side. That'll be 5 hoopings. I'm using the swirl design. It doesn't need to be centered. I don't have to do anything fancy with it. I can start and line up one here and do 1, 2, 3, 4 hoopings. 4 wins over 5 and using 2 tiles. That's how I'm going to lay this out. I'm going to lay it out for 4 hoopings. Now I'm going to lay it out first and mark everything, and then I'm going to look at it with my hoop and figure out how much extra batting and how much extra backing do I need. That's why I haven't cut my backing and batting yet. You have to hoop all 3 layers, so you want to make sure you have enough to go around. If you end up short, let's say you've already cut your backing and you're going to put it in your big hoop. So here's the big giant hoop, and my backing, let's say it only goes to here and to here. Just sew a fabric strip on it, make it big enough. You have to remember when you're using the clear blue tiles and doing this on your embroidery machine, you need enough to hoop it. And you have to be patient when you hoop it. When we go to hoop, we're going to loosen your hoop all the way because you're going to have your top, batting, and the backing. You're going to have 3 layers going into this. How do I know where to start? The easiest actually is center out, but again, that gives me 5 hoopings instead of 4. I need 3.5 hoopings. Looking at it, this is half, there's a quarter. I'm going to line up a quarter over here, and I'm going to look at it first before I mark anything. There's some lines on these. I hope you can see them. There's some grid lines. I think if I line this up with the outside, that'll work. So I've got a little hanging over there, and I'm going to eyeball it. That's landing in the center of the house, about the roof a little bit before, about the center of the roof again. That works. That worked almost perfectly. That gives me 4 hoopings. When I start, if I use these grid lines and line that up, it's a little hard to see if it's centered. I can move this little open dot right here where the border and the seams intersect. I'm going to put tape down there because I don't want to mark all over my runner. I don't want to have to deal with getting it wet later and then waiting for it to dry. So I'm going to put that there, and I can see the center seam right here and my border seam right there. Now what's interesting is because my tile is running up and down off of it, I only need to worry about marking this side here. I don't have to mark these top corners. Just for illustration purposes, here's the 8x12. Let's say I use that. Do you see that? How I've got a little bit of fabric here and a little bit of fabric here. As long as I centered that, it would probably fit within the binding, and that would be okay. But since I have the hoop space, I'd rather run it off the project and make sure it's all fully quilted, just like putting it on a long arm machine. So I'm going to find that center spot, mark that with the dot, and mark the crosshairs. I'm centering the seam inside this arrow here and centering the seam here. That'll be fine. It's a swirl design I'm going to use. It doesn't, or the loops, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to mark right there. And I'm keeping this on my tape. And then I need to make a mark over here. I'm going to grab a piece of tape. Again, you can write on your quilt. I just don't want to deal with having a wet quilt later. If I was using the 8x12 instead, I would put another piece of tape here and mark there and mark there. There's my first set of marks. Right here, there's the dot in the center, the crosshairs, and then the edge. I'm going to show you this. This is on page 16 of your user guide. It shows you how to lay it out with pictures. Right here are those bottom corners. See the bottom, and then it goes up, and the bottom, and it goes up. Do you see how they're overlapping that center line? So as they're laying out here, that center mark is lining up. I'm going to get a piece of paper and show this to you. Here's that example from before. This was the 6x6 tile. I'm going to make this neater. Let's pretend that's the corner of my tile. and I mark it. Here's your corner. You would line up your next tile so that you're writing right over that same line again, if that makes sense. I didn't line that up very well, see that? But I only have one line in the center. You don't want, let's say this is your corner, and then you move your tile. You don't want this. You don't want two lines here. You want it to look continuous. Like that. So your line is overlapping in the center. You don't want like that with a gap in the middle. Then you'll have a gap with your quilting. Here's my blue mark from the side from when it was right here. I'm going to use that to help line up for here. I can see about the center of my house where the door is where I'm going to need my tape. And then I'm going to need another piece over there. Again, you can mark right on your project. I just don't want to do that. I need to line this up. And then I know my center line is running along this seam. And you can also look at your crosshairs here. If you drew it all the way out, like if you went all the way out, that will help you line up. I'm okay with using the seam as my guide on this project. It's kind of project dependent. Get this in the center. And see, when I go to draw this line, I'm right on top of the same line. That's what you want. Center mark, crosshair, crosshair. I could put more tape on this side, that would have helped. Crosshair. And then my side mark here. You can check your crosshairs. Looks good. I'm right along that seam. Now I'm ready to move this again. And you'll notice too, I'm not writing down the size. Remember how I talked about writing the size? I'm doing the entire thing with an 8x14 block. I don't need to write down the size. I'm just going to leave this out until I'm sitting at my machine. I'm not going to put it away because if I put it away and I didn't write down the size, I have to figure out what size I have. Line that up there again. I'm going to be about at the door and about at the roof again for my tape. I'm going to put this here. Here, let's do a couple pieces this time. Let's do one this way and one this way. And I can make my crosshairs a little bit bigger for you to see what that looks like. And then I'm going to have one right about there. Line up against this. That looks good. I'm going to center that on my seam. Yeah, my seam's a little bit crooked. It's going to look good when it's done though. If you're a little bit crooked, really don't worry about it. I drew right on top of that previous line. I'm in the right spot. Crosshair, crosshair. Another reason I like to use the tape is because when you don't use tape, you want a light hand with this. I have a tendency to have a heavy hand. I just know myself, so the tape works for me. And then I need to mark over here. And I'll need one more hooping. Let's slide it down. Now for this hooping, all I need to mark is the center. I've got my tape ready. Right about there, right at the very end. And that's all I need to mark because I'm going off my project. We're going to center that. Mark again. I'm marking right on top of the other mark. I've got that lined up correctly. Draw my dot, my crosshair. Everything is marked. You can count your crosshairs. 1, 2, 3, 4 hoopings. Now I need to get my batting and my backing. I've got a piece of scrap batting here. I only need enough batting to cover my project and make sure it'll be all nice and quilted. That looks good. This is plenty big enough. This is the fabric I'm going to use for my backing. Obviously not this piece, but I have scraps of this. It was used for backing on a quilt. I did set it down and laid the top and the batting on top of it to make sure it wouldn't show through. I've got the fabric laid out, way more fabric than I'm going to need. Again, you can cut your fabric for your backing to fit your project, and then figure out your hooping and then sew some fabric scraps on the side. I just happen to have a big honking piece of this fabric, so I'm going to use that. I have this 505 temporary adhesive spray. What I'm going to do, spray the batting, press it down to the backing, spray the batting, press down the top, give it a little press on my iron, and then we're going to start hooping. It's time to hoop our project. Loosen your hoop all the way. You've got backing, batting, and your quilt top, so make sure it's nice and loose. If you have your plastic piece that came with your hoop, this will be helpful. Not required if you can make adjustments on your machine, but this will help with the hooping. My project needs 4 hoopings. I've got one center here and the other one is off camera. Since this one's right where the camera is, we're going to start with that one. This is where the plastic grid comes in handy. Your plastic piece probably has something like down here. It shows where the arm of the machine is, and it says ABC. It has letters, so you know you don't have it upside down. Here's my center markings here, and up and down. Here's the center dot. I can feel my hoop underneath. My center dot on my runner is here, so I'm not quite where I need to be. I want to get that as close to center as I can. Now it's where it needs to be, but I have to slide to fit it in the hoop. This is just a matter of sitting here and fussing with it and deciding how exact you want to be. That looks really good. I'm going to go ahead and push that down. And again, your hoop has to be nice and loose because you've got all 3 layers. There's no stabilizer in here other than what's already in your runner. It's just the backing, the batting, and your quilt top. Now as I pushed it down, the center moved up. So I have to pull it down. That looks really good. It's almost exactly centered. Again, it's just a matter of sitting here and fussing with it. And remember, we have to tighten the hoop as well. What I'm trying to do is get my center dot inside my center circle. It looks pretty good. It's actually almost exact. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it a little bit, but I can see I need to pull this because it's wavy underneath. It needs to lie flat, like when you're doing an embroidery project. So I like to hold this down to make sure it doesn't pop out. This is to me, this is the hardest part about this type of quilting system, is quilting with the thickness inside the embroidery hoop. See how it popped out as I'm trying to straighten it, and then it moved a little bit again. So now I need to loosen it again. Magnetic hoops might be easier. I don't have them. I know they're really expensive, so I've never bothered to purchase any. I'd love to hear feedback if you have them and if you've used them for doing this. If you think it's easy, definitely put it in the comments below, not just for me, but for everybody else. In addition to lining up this center dot, I've got this nice line that helps line up this center seam, and a line here. Like I can see this is right on the seam, and then my top kind of waves a little. I need to make an adjustment, make sure it's in straight. Same up here, make an adjustment. It popped out again. You get the idea. You have to sit here and fuss with it and get it as close to perfect as you can, and once you get it where you want to get it, hand tighten, screwdriver tighten. As you're working to get this lying nice and flat and lying correct, you can reference your marks. Anything outside of these marks, this way, or if you've got the marks on the top and bottom, which I don't because my tile was bigger, but if you're using a 5x7 hoop and you've got some marks, anything outside the marks will not be quilted. So focus on getting it flat and centered inside your marks and then lining up that crosshair. Make sure you screwdriver tighten. If you're using the traditional hoop, you have got to make sure this is nice and tight so when it starts, it doesn't pop apart. I'm going to take the plastic off, and we need to get the extra part of our runner out of the way. That's why they give you the slat bands. You can also use quilt clips, whatever you want. Most of my quilt is off to the side. and I have a lot of extra because I cut so much extra for the backing. So I'm going to roll. You don't want this to get caught. Now this is a small project. These might be a little big for this, but if you're doing a big quilt, these work really good for this. Let's see. You can use them for this. There you go. You just bend them and they turn into the circle. Just going to bend that and bend that. This is nice and out of the way. I have extra on this side as well. I'm going to roll that and grab some clips and make sure I clip it out of the way. Now I'm not taking this tape off until I sit down at the machine and I get my design pulled up. If I take the tape off now and I pick up my hoop and let's say I've over tightened or didn't realize I didn't have this secure and it pops out, and I've already taken off my tape, I lose my markings. So I'll take my tape off before we start. Worst comes to worst, if you use tape and you forget, you just have to pick it off out from under your quilting. Let me go ahead and clip this. I can see I've got a little lump right here. Here's my line where the quilting is going to stop. As long as this is nice and flat inside where the quilting is, I'm okay. I don't mind that it's bunched up over here. In fact, I'm probably going to put a little piece of tape right here to make sure that this stays bunched up over here. I don't want the bubble to move and to end up in my quilting area. I'm going to smooth it out. I'm going to tape this right to the side of my hoop. I know my quilting area is going to stay in between these two lines, so it's not going to quilt over that. And I'm going to do the same thing down here and add a little piece of tape. That makes sure this is all nice and flat. I actually added a piece here, here, and here. That's holding that little excess fabric from the top out of my quilting area. I went and pulled some thread. I've got this Floriani thread. I haven't even opened this one yet. Here's the color. Put in a fresh bobbin too. Check your bobbin, make sure it's not about to run out. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. Everything is on USB. We're going to bring that up. Here's my USB. I have some other things on this other than what came with the clear blue tiles. On mine it's under embroidery, files, quilting. My machine needs the PES. And here you can see all the choices. The bitty blocks, those are those little squares. Border loops, border swirls, centering crosshairs. This is in your user guide and there's information about this. This helps you if you need to center. Fall, which I'm not going to use. I'm not going to use fall, spring, summer, or winter. And the one that I picked is loops. See how it says block by block and clear blue tiles? We want clear blue tiles. I used the 8 by 14 tile. That's the one I need to find. It's one of these. Do you see that? It says 8 by 1. That looks like a square. I'm guessing this is 8 by 10, 8 by 12, and 8 by 14. Let's bring it up. You can see the area that it's going to quilt. It says 13.83, 7.84. So that's 14 and 8. That's the correct one. On my machine I hit set and then embroidery. See the little crosshairs right there? That's the center. Let's go see how close I am to center. I can see the center dot. I'm going to hand crank my needle. I'm off by about a needle's width from center. What do you do if you're off? Honestly, for me, a needle's width, I'm not worried about it. It is not going to make a difference. In fact, if I go like this and smooth my fabric a little bit more, now I'm right over center. Depending on your machine, you should have ways. Some of them have like a laser light. Some of them use something called a snowman. But my machine does have a laser, and I can scooch the needle and scooch the needle. Every machine is different. That's going to depend on your machine. If this was way off, let's say the needle was way over here, I probably would need to rehoop it because I wouldn't be able to adjust it to the correct amount inside the space that was available to quilt in the hoop. But again, I went like this. Tighten this tape on the side. Remember I put tape on the side? Let's put the needle down. I'm right at center. That's all I needed to do. I'm good to go. But before I start, let's back up here. I'm going to take off this tape, and this tape because I don't need these markings anymore. If you forget, you just have to dig it out from under your quilting. Not a big deal. I'm going to pull these off and then we'll quilt our first section. Check your sides, any extra fabric, make sure nothing's caught up and underneath your hoop. I'm going to check the back. Everything looks good. Here we go. Pausing this because I want to point out, if yours is like mine, it's quilting up and off my runner. I need to keep an eye on this side right here to make sure when the presser foot comes back it doesn't get caught. I can certainly tape that and tape along the bottom. I probably should have done that. I'm going to add some tape really quick just to the edge on both sides, and then I'm going to resume my quilting. My first section is complete. You probably saw my hands getting in there. Be really careful. I probably shouldn't do that. Don't ever get your hand too close to your needle. I was trying to keep it from bumping and getting a pleat in certain places. It looks like it came out really good. We're going to take this over to the table and have a look. We're over at the table. It looks really good. I'm really glad I put this tape there. I think it would have caught the fabric. I need to make sure I tape the top and the bottom. We're going to be putting binding over this and trimming. I'm going to just leave that tape there for now. If you taped and you want to take it off, you can, but you can see it's going to get caught under the thread. So since I know I'm going to cut this off, I'm not going to fuss with it. I am going to need to move this tape out of the way so I can get my hoop open. There's one thing I do see. When the loop came around here, it actually stitched right in the ditch. I thought I had a thread break, but it's funny. It's sunk in right here, so it almost looks like the thread disappears. I'm glad it wasn't a thread break. This is ready to slide to the next section for quilting. I've got my hoop loosened. Working center out is always a good way to do this. I need to take my clips off for this and open this up. Now remember, the way I set this up, I've got this big piece of backing fabric. This is going to be in the center of my hoop rather than fussing with different size tiles. So you can see, since I just got this out of the hoop, it's kind of wonky and wants to press up. I'm going to put tape all along here and along the bottom because I know the machine is going to be going back and forth over this open edge of this fabric. I've got all of that covered with tape. I've got my bottom hoop underneath. Here's the center. That's about in the center. Just do the same thing you did before. You need to get your top hoop and get your grid. I can see that I'm nowhere near where I need to be on that, but that's okay. Get that grid in place, and then you have to hoop it again. You'll do this every time, so each time it finishes one section, you've got to take it off, and you've got to hoop again. Again, I think that's the hardest part about this process. It comes out great. It can be a little bit time consuming to hoop. If you do this on a regular basis, you will get faster. I haven't used these in a while. I've been doing everything either on my Baby Lock Ballad with a squiggly stitch, or I've been putting it on the long arm. That feels like it's pretty much where it needs to be. There's my dot. There's my crosshairs. I'm going to hand tighten, screwdriver tighten, clip up the extra, roll up the extra, and go back to the machine. If anyone's curious, that was a 3-minute stitch out when it's not time lapse. Let's look and see how close I am here. Wow, almost exact. I'm good with almost exact. I'm going to take this tape off, and that's the only tape I have to remove for this because I'm on the side of my project, and the other tape got removed when I took it off for the section we just completed. Because I've got the bottom, the side, and the top taped, since I'm running back and forth over this, I am not going to get up and walk away from my machine. I'm going to watch this as it quilts. I'm sure you saw that get caught. I'm off the project right now. I don't have to continue right from this spot. I've got the little needle plus and minus. I can move my needle. This is going one at a time. Right there is when it gets back onto my fabric. And I'm looking at the design. It's going to go from here and then it's going to travel down. So I'm going to start it right from that point. We've got another section done. Let's go get this out of the hoop and look at the two sections next to each other. I'm sure you saw it catch with the tape. If you take something to a long arm quilter, and I do long arm quilting, one of the things we do is we baste down the edges of your quilt before we start. You use a long basting stitch, and every time you move the quilt up, you baste the sides. And you do that for the same reason, to keep the presser foot on the long arm from catching that fabric. So if you know you're going to be going on and off your fabric like I did with this project, before you hoop it, if you wanted to, you could put a basting stitch on it all the way around the outside on your sewing machine. The tape works fine too. It's just a matter of what works for you. I'm going to pull this out of the hoop and we're going to get a close-up of where the two patterns line up next to each other. Here's my two sections. Now I'm standing right in front of it and I have a hard time telling where one ends and one begins. It's right here, and I only know that because I watched the machine do its thing. See how close this is? These are the two thread lines. You cannot tell that this isn't one continuous line. This looks fantastic. I want to take the slap bands off. And again, I'm going to leave this tape on. It's going to get trimmed. I have two more sections. It's all done the same. Now, if you're doing this and you've got a bigger project and see how it's kind of getting wrinkly and you're worried you're going to get bubbles or tucks or pleats, you can take a moment and take it to your iron and give it a nice press. Don't iron over your tape, and make sure everything is lying flat. You can always do that between hoopings. I think I'll be fine. We've got two more to do. I'm going to set this up just like the other ones. My bottom hoop is down underneath my project, just like before. Top hoop is going on. I can already tell that's not even close to center, even without my little plastic thing. This is a great project, well, the way this one is hooping, that I could probably do even without the plastic thing, because the center lines are going right along this seam. Makes it kind of easy. I need to loosen this a bit more and get it centered. I'm moving my bands to this side because now I have more over here, and I'm going to clip this side. A big plus to using this method for quilting is you can do a little bit at a time. If you don't have a lot of time one day, maybe all you have time for is just to quilt one section. As long as you have everything marked, you can do one section, take the hoop off, set the project aside, come back the next day. Everything looks good. I'm going to take this over to the machine. We've got two more sections left for my project. I actually caught some of this underneath. You see that? But I'm not going to rehoop because there's only quilting until about here. You can see the quilting here. This isn't going to be a problem. It's in tight. It's straight. I'm leaving it. I've got it on my machine. I'm going to check the center mark. Really close, about half a needle's width away. Honestly, same thing. Slide it over. I don't even think I'm going to need to tape it, but I can. I can add a little tape here like I did the first time, and that'll keep it centered. Before you quilt, take off any pieces of tape. I did a little bit of tape here on the side. I am really close to dead center. I'm good with that. I'm going to take off these two pieces. These are my markings. And then I added my tape on the bottom edge and the top edge. Section 3 is done. Again, Watch your fingers. I probably shouldn't do that. I'm going to leave that tape and leave this tape. I pulled off this tape. I'm going to pop this up and roll it to the last section. Hand tighten, screwdriver tighten, make sure everything's centered. Take off your plastic. Tuck your extra fabric out of the way. We're going to go to the machine and do our last section. We're on the last section. I'm going to check my needle again. Spot on. I'm going to peel this one up. All the rest of the tape stays, and I'll be keeping an eye on it, cutting the thread, moving the machine as necessary if I'm having trouble with the edges of my quilting. Let's look at what just happened here. And isn't this the way? This is the very last part. We're probably more than halfway done and we get a problem. The presser foot got caught on the seam. I'm not sure if you can see this. I've got a big long stitch right here. That does not look good. I want to take that out. And I will tell you, this happens on long arm machines as well. Sometimes it gets caught on something. I've been quilting before and had a power surge and the machine kind of hiccups and you have to backtrack on your pattern and pull out some of the stitching. It's not a big deal. Try not to get frustrated. Make sure when you're doing projects like this that you have time and that you had a snack beforehand. That's always important. I'm going to slide this back, close that, pull my fabric out of the way, and I'm going to back up my needle until the broken point in my design. We're all done. Let's get this out of the hoop and have a look. I went ahead and loosened my hoop already. We're going to take this out of our hoop, take off the slap bands, and we're going to have a look at the quilting. As I go down the project, I cannot tell that I did sections. It looks fantastic. It looks continuous. That's the reason for using the clear blue tiles. That's what you want to see. It looks great. Now I need to trim off all my excess fabric and then we'll put a label on it and we'll do our binding. I will do the trimming off camera, but I do want to show you a quick tip that I learned when I'm trimming. I can see this isn't perfectly straight. I've got a nice seam right here to line up. On your ruler, you can look for a nice straight line. Line it up with your seam. Make sure that's straight. You can also check it against this seam and then trim, and then you'll have a straight edge. Then when you have this straight edge, trim this side next. That's what I like to do. And you would line up along the straight edge, find a mark that lines up with your seam, trim, and go all the way around your project. I have to do it off camera because the tripod is over there and I don't have enough room to trim, so I have to move the tripod and do my trimming. I've got everything trimmed. I've got a tiny little piece of tape here. I actually took off an extra 1/4 of an inch on mine because I had taped it a little bit aggressively, and when you try to take the tape off after you've trimmed, you pull the thread. So rather than pulling the thread out, I just gave myself a little bit extra to trim. I got it nice and even. I'm going to show you how I attach a tag to the back. I have some of these woven tags. These happen to come from Fat Quarter Shop. I've had them for a while. When they went on sale, I think I bought 5 or 6 packages. I don't know if they still have them, but little tags like this are great for small projects. You can put your initials and the date. You can put a little bit of writing on there if you want, so I'll do that. I use this Pentel gel roller for fabric. I'll put my name, initials, and date, and then I'll put it like this in the corner. When I do my binding, I machine bind, I stitch down around the back, and then I bring it around to the front. If you've never done binding before, I already have a few videos about binding. I will link them below and you can watch the whole binding process. Look below if you need some tips on binding. I'm going to go ahead, put my tag on, and bind my quilt. I've got my binding on. We'll get a look at it here and then I'll go put it on the bigger table so you can see everything at once and in the right direction. Here it is on the sewing machine cabinet. I'm holding the camera. Hopefully it's nice and steady. It came out great. I'm going to put it back on the table. We're going to get a close-up of the quilting. Let's get a close-up of our clear blue tiles quilting. It looks fantastic. You cannot tell where each section ends and the next begins. I know it's here because I did the quilting, but gosh, there's not a lot of space between each section. It looks about as continuous as you can get without having put it on a long arm. I hope you've enjoyed making the clear blue tiles seasonal houses table runner with me. Please leave me some feedback in the comments below. Let me know if this was helpful for using clear blue tiles, if you like the project. Would you like to see more projects that use clear blue tiles for quilting? And of course, any questions. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. I've got lots of fun Kimberbell, quilting, cross stitch, and rope crafts on my channel. As always, open to feedback. Please leave it in the comments below, especially if there's a particular project you'd like to see. This was a request from a viewer. Thank you so much for requesting this. I hope everyone's had fun and knows a little bit more about using their clear blue tiles. See you next time!